We are creatures of desire. What we most desire is meaning. What makes us suffer most is a lack of meaning.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Marital therapist, author, and communications trainer Andrew G. Marshall invites guests from all walks of life to discuss what makes life meaningful.
Hello, I'm Andrew G. Marshall. Welcome to The Meaningful Life. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Podbean, and wherever you find your podcasts. How do we thrive in the age of artificial intelligence? It's a pressing question because AI is making progress in giant leaps, and we're facing an upheaval that has been described as the Industrial Revolution times 10. A provisional answer to this question might be that we need to have a good idea about what makes us human. My witness on The Meaningful Life today is focused on AI and how society can prepare. Soren Gordhamer is the founder of Wisdom 2.0, a conference exploring mindfulness, wisdom, and compassion, and combining it with tech wisdom. Soren has interviewed wisdom teachers, walked across numerous countries, and worked with the New York Kids in Juvenile Hall, and has also been an early investor in AI. He's brought this all together in a new book called The Essential, Discovering What Really Matters in the Age of Distraction. And I was reminded when I was preparing this program just how much we live in the age of distraction, because my partner kept on showing me videos of cute dogs accidentally destroying people's homes, which were wonderful, but were not actually very helpful at the time. So, Soren, whether AI benefits everyone or just a few is, in your opinion, down to not just the AI companies and governments, but all of us. Can you explain what you mean by this?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me on your show, and it's a pleasure to meet you and be in your community. You know, I think that if you look at some of the past innovations, we had things like the internet, we had things like the smartphone and the iPhone, and they've done an incredible job in certain ways, increasing commerce, increasing communication, helping people, across the world communicate. But they haven't really helped our well-being. If you look at statistics, particularly the smartphone has been detrimental to young people's mental health. And so we've failed in certain aspects. And I think as AI begins to take form, we have another opportunity. And if we make the mistake of not tending to our well-being and to humanity's well-being as AI takes form, I think we're going to pay severe consequences. And so when I say that it's up to all of us, I mean that we all need to join this conversation, educate ourselves on how AI is going to be unfolding and be able to speak up, whether that's to the companies that are creating these new AI or to government officials that are making decisions about what a reasonable types of regulations are for the AI companies. But I don't think we can just leave it up to the AI companies and just be like, oh, well, they'll figure it out. Because I think this power that is being created, that humanity is creating, is unlike anything we've ever seen. And so to the extent that we can all educate ourselves and have a voice, I think we have a better chance of not making some of the same mistakes we made in past innovations.
And how do we actually have a voice? Because I'm speaking to more and more regular people in my therapy room, and they're talking about this. It's not something that's just coming down the track. It's sort of arrived. And I wouldn't have the first idea of where to register my thoughts.
Well, of course, always the first task is to try to live as mindfully and wisely in relationship to everything as we can, and that includes technology. So if you look at ads, for example, on TikTok and Instagram, they're getting much, 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 much better because of AI, because AI knows everything about you. And so it can feed you that next ad that's more likely to get you to click or get you to stay on. So the algorithms are optimized to sustain and hold your attention as long as they can. They really don't care. If they can somehow get you to spend 90% of your life on their platform, they're thrilled because, their profits will go up. So just to know, the whole system is optimized to keep you on those systems. The last thing the algorithm wants is for you to step away from that platform, from your device, or from whatever you're consuming. So just know that whenever you get onto any of these social platforms, there's an optimization around how do we keep this person on. So I think the first task is just understanding that there's a system at play that doesn't have your well-being in mind. It has engagement in mind. And so we have to create boundaries for ourselves and how we relate to all these different technologies so that we're getting outside, we're spending time with friends, we're spending time in nature, we're spending time doing contemplative practices, we're taking care of our inner world. So I think that's kind of first and foremost is how are we all living aligned and responsibly and wisely within this age that we're living in. And then the second piece, I think, is as we understand these large language models, one of the things we have to realize is that there's huge potential benefits. So, I think we'll probably figure out a, solution for cancer and solution for a lot of these health ailments that have been facing humanity for years, because now we have this super intelligence of sorts that we can put to tackle many of these issues. I think there'll be huge improvements. However, there's a limitation of what AI can do. I don't think it can ever really satisfy the need for presence, the need for connection, the need for touch, the need for other humans. And so it's very, very important that we don't forget, even though there's this new technology that can do all these great things, that actual human love and human connection, human touch, and this feeling like we're a part of this natural world must not be lost or forgotten as we navigate this. And so when I say that people should first find that balance for themselves and understand that there's an addictive nature to a lot of the platforms that we use, and that AI is going to superpower that, and that when they have conversations with friends, that when they have conversations with family, when they have conversations with others, to the extent we can have open conversations about how this AI is impacting us, I think that it's really up to the society to begin to push our government and our elected officials into regulation that is thoughtful. And I think sometimes regulation can be too harsh and too limiting. But I also think, like with social media, we basically said there's no regulation. You give anything you want to our kids' minds. It's like if you had a son or daughter and 14 years old, and a stranger came to the door and said, "Hey, I would like to go talk to your daughter in her room. Can I go talk to her?" And you're like, "Sure, yeah, whatever." And all of a sudden the stranger walks in and has an hour-long conversation with your daughter. Most people would probably say, like, that's not what I want. I don't want some random stranger coming in and telling my daughter who knows what. That's kind of what we have now with a lot of our social media.
And it's not one stranger, it's hundreds of strangers.
Hundreds
thousands.
of strangers, yeah, who we have no idea what their intentions are. We have no idea what their information is. Are they trying to be helpful? Are they trying not to be helpful? But we've just opened those floodgates. And I think it's been a real mistake. I think it's been really, really hurtful and harmful. And it doesn't mean social media is all bad. It just means that we haven't done a good job of monitoring it. And AI is going to supercharge everything. It's going to supercharge people who want to do harm. It's going to supercharge people who want to do good. And it's really, really important that we as a society start asking those questions.
And I assume you were also an early adopter as well as an early investor in AI. How has it changed you? And I don't mean what you do. I mean the way you think and the way that you act.
Yeah. I was getting out of a house yesterday. It was a house that we were renting, and I didn't know exactly all the different instructions for how to close the house up and where to put the towels and what to do with the thermometer and all the things. So I just uploaded the user guide to ChatGPT and put on the voice and had it guide me and said, "Hey, you put the towels in this room. You can make sure you turn the thermostat off here." And it was super, super helpful. And so increasingly, I go to AI for any question that I have. If I want health records, I put in AI and say, "Can you help me decipher these blood tests I just took? Problems that I'm struggling with, like, hey, what do you think about this?" So increasingly, I look to the AI to just answer any questions that I have. And that's helpful on certain fronts, particularly if you look at like a user guide and you don't want to have to read the entire user guide, why not upload it to ChatGPT and just tell it to give you the most like relevant information. On the other hand, I might lose my connections with friends that I used to call and ask them for advice. I used to develop, and so we're developing relationships potentially with an AI, and we're not as developing those same relationships with friends or with family that we used to call for support. And I think that's something that we have to be considerate about. So for me, it's been a really amazing tool, and I use it every day. And I'm trying to be very thoughtful about how I use it and to make sure that I'm still getting kind of what really, really matters, which is human connection.
So artificial intelligence is a time to bring forward our natural intelligence and better understand who we are, what our own strengths are as human beings. How do you think we can do that?
So I think the biggest kind of invitation that we have is to really, really know who we are. And when you ask somebody who they are, they'll like give you their job or what they do for a living. They'll tell you their name. Maybe they'll tell you their role. I'm a mother or father. I'm a executive, or I'm a janitor, or whatever it is.
It's the CV, isn't it?
It's the CV. And so we get used to thinking of ourselves as these identities. And what I try to really explore in the book is just to look about how do these stories of me, I like to call them, how do these stories of me get created? And how do they either serve us or not serve us? And so it's one of the stories of me is I'm smart, or I'm strong, or I'm innovative.
I'm the pretty one.
I'm the pretty one. Yeah. Until you're not. Or I'm the smart one until you're not. Or I'm the successful one until you're not. Yeah. And so all these identities, right, that we have multiple identities and these stories that we believe. And then we try to reinforce them in the world. So when I meet somebody, I try to reinforce the story of whatever my story is. I'm important, or I'm pretty. Yes. I dress a certain way. I talk a certain way, all to reinforce the self-image. And so much of our life, and I think it happens a lot through trauma, there was some experience we had of pain. And there's this identity that forms around that pain to keep that pain inaccessible. And so we live our lives around these stories of me, and often never really knowing that they're just stories. And I think part of the invitation we have today is, can we wake up and begin to see that the stories that we tell, that there's a deeper intelligence inside each one of us beyond these stories that we tell about each other. And if we don't know that, if we don't find that, we'll constantly look to the world to fill us. We'll look to success to fill us, to money to fill us, to power to fill us, to more drinks or more whatever, more muscles, you name it. We're constantly looking for something externally to fill what's a void internally. And people can do that through time in nature, do that through meditation, do that through all kinds of different avenues. But to me, that is the most essential kind of like work of our time.
So if the question is, who am I? And the answer is not, I'm a father and a tech entrepreneur. What could be
What's
the answer?
The answer?
No, well, not. No, I mean, give us at least a sort of a sense of what the answer could be. I mean, obviously, it's going to be different for everybody else, and I'm expecting your answer is a work in progress. But give us some ideas.
Yeah. So the answer, if it's in words, it doesn't work. It's in a felt experience. So as those things start to fade away, as those things no longer become our orientation and take our attention in that direction, a different felt experience of life can arise. And, was it 13.8 billion years ago, there was the Big Bang, and so much of the universe kind of emerged in that time. And in many ways, we're remnants of the Big Bang. I mean, we are that consciousness that is continuing to emerge and evolve and kind of taking shape in these bodies as human. It's something we call humans now. But if we can actually tap into the energy of a different kind of intelligence. And so the best pointer I can give is just to know that it's not in a story and it's not in a thought, and that everybody can kind of find their own way of looking more deeply.
So you started to sort of look deeply when you were introduced to meditation, spirituality, and Buddhism in your childhood by your father. Why did he feel that you needed this introduction?
It's a great question. I think he felt very aligned with those teachings. And some of it was Buddhism. Some of it was Ram Dass, who was a big inspiration to him in the 60s.
Yeah.
And so I was born in 68, and he never really participated. He had 5 kids with my mom. And so my dad never really participated in that journey of going to India and, going sitting with the different gurus of the time. But he loved the teachings, and he felt very inspired by the teachings and that spiritual journey. So I think for 2 reasons. One is he saw that I was suffering a lot. And 2, he felt a strong resonance with some of the teachings that were coming from the East. And he was a psychologist.
What sort of suffering were you having as a teenager?
So the usual sufferings that most kids have. But my parents divorced at that time, and there was 5 kids, and we were all living with my father. My mom was having something of a midlife crisis, nervous breakdown. So she had to leave and kind of take care of herself. So all of a sudden I was a kid without access to my mom. And that just created a lot of shame and a lot of hurt, a lot of pain because I didn't understand it at the time, what was going on. And so I isolated myself. I stopped playing some of the sports I played. I stopped hanging out with friends. I kind of just like really isolated myself. And there was a positive aspect to it and a negative aspect to it. The negative aspect to it, I was just depressed and lonely. The positive aspect to it was I got interested in how do we deal with suffering. And so at 14, I was reading books on Buddhism because I was like, how do I deal with this? I had no idea that you could have your heart broken in such a way.
Thank goodness there was no social media at that time, because
yeah.
Who knows what you might have found instead of those books on Buddhism.
It's true. I had books and I had these cassette tapes, and those were my lifelines. And I do wonder today how young people who are facing challenges, how they deal with those challenges. And one of the things we were part of a venture fund called Wisdom Ventures. And one of the things that we really want to support and bring to the world is a new value-based social media company, because I don't think social media is inherently bad or wrong, but I think the incentives of the current platforms are generally not healthy to people. And we need to find a new platform that allows for people to share, but doesn't have the same intentions and values that the current ones have, which I don't think are healthy.
So how did these books and the spirituality of Buddhism and meditation help you through these dark times?
Well, I think the biggest one, in Buddhism, they talk about the truth of suffering. And when I was going through a lot of pain, I thought it must be my fault. I did something wrong. Why is this happening to me? And then when I read and listened to the talks on Buddhism, I realized, we all suffer. It's the human condition to suffer. And that there is this thing called compassion, which means how am I meeting the suffering? And self-compassion involves how do I meet the suffering in my own self? Can I keep my heart open to my own pain and really see clearly my own pain in a way that breeds understanding and care? And can I look and see other people and see the pain that they're going through and relate to them compassionately? So it shifted my orientation from feeling like shame and isolation because of my suffering and pain to a sense of shared humanity. And I think that was the biggest thing it did. And it also gave me a tool through meditation of practicing ways to concentrate my mind and focus my mind so that it was less consumed and absorbed with all the potential scenarios of my life that took me out of the present moment. And I realized that the more I actually live in the present moment, the happier I am.
And I'm also interested that you've sort of put two different stories in front of us about what happened, so that we have your mother left because I was a bad boy in some kind of way.
I did something wrong, yeah.
And then we've got a second story that effectively life is hard and, I've just learning this sooner than everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got two very different stories. And, one of the things you say in the book is that essentially the world runs on stories. And this is a good example of it. But I think I'd like you to share a different example as well, because I think this one's really interesting. You talk about dumpster diving. So first of all, tell us what dumpster diving is and the different stories that can be told through dumpster diving and how that impacts us.
So just to give a little bit of a background, when I was in my early 20s, I'd always wanted to go for long walks. It just fascinated me. And I heard about a group that was going to do a 3.5-year world walk. So across the US, United States, Europe, Asia, and Japan, finishing in Hiroshima on Hiroshima Day. And so that really, really excited me. So I joined the group at different times in their journey through the US. I joined them partly in Pakistan and India, and then I joined them for the last part in Japan. And we were supposed to walk with these monks, but we just didn't get along with the monks. We peace walk differently. I like to joke. So we're on our own in Japan. We didn't have any money or much money at all. And we had to figure out how to survive because we wanted to finish our walk in Hiroshima. And so we couldn't afford food, really. So we decided we'd dumpster dive, which just means going in dumpsters and looking for food, which can be very gross. Like if you're dumpster diving like a house and you look at the food that's in the trash, it's not very appetizing. But if you go to like a 7-Eleven or a grocery market, sometimes there's these prepared meals. And the meals are fine and they're wrapped and they're nice. They expired the day before, but they're clean and they're safe to eat. So when we were walking across Japan, we had to figure out how to eat. We realized that we could dumpster dive these convenience stores that had these prepared sushi dinners. And so that's what we did for about 3 months. Probably 90% of our food, came from these dumpsters. And it was super interesting to me because when people would look at us going through the trash, I had different stories I could tell. One was a story that I had failed and I was so poor and destitute that I couldn't even afford, like I was at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom because I couldn't even afford food and I was a failure. And this other story I could tell was that I was an environmental activist who was so dedicated to, doing this walk for the benefit of the earth that I was willing to survive in any way that I could survive and go through these dumpsters. And I realized then the power of stories, that we can tell all kinds of different stories based on the same experience. And one of the things I learned from that is when somebody looks at you and they look at you with disregard, as if to promote shame, we don't have to take that story on, right? So we were losers compared to most people who had looked at us dumpster diving. But that was just their story. I didn't need to take that story on. And I think this is one of the most fascinating things about life, Andrew, is what are the stories that run us? What are the stories that we get from society? And how many of those are actually true? And how do we begin to be more creative and navigate our own stories? I mean, you look at somebody like Trump in the United States, who's like a crazy, wild leader. He has his own stories and he sticks by his stories no matter what. This is what's happened. This is the truth. And I think that power can be used in negative ways and in positive ways, but there really is a power of being able to identify the stories that run our lives and whether those are conscious or not.
And a lot of the time they're not conscious. And it's not just our stories, it's other people's stories.
That we take on. Yeah. And countries have stories too. Families have stories. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the wisest things I ever heard was, your opinion of me is none of my business.
Yeah, I think Byron Katie said that. Maybe somebody else said that too. Yeah. But you probably, I'm guessing you grew up, if you reflect, I'm guessing, and you think about your life, there's probably stories. Your family probably had stories. Would you say that impacted you? And often the stories are never spoken. They're just assumed.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes these are stories that actually don't belong to your generation. I mean, my family was run by stories from the end of from the First World War that was still running through our families, which was, talking about things makes things worse. Now, nobody ever said that, but, I spent half of my life fighting against that. It's inside me. I spend my whole life talking about emotions and feelings. I run a podcast that talks about emotions and feelings. And so, I'm fighting against this 24/7, but I still catch it impacting, me and being nervous about talking about things with my partner, which I shouldn't be, but they're still in there.
Yeah. And they might have a truth at certain times. I think this is what happens is we take something that at certain times is probably not appropriate, right? There are certain conditions where it's probably not appropriate, but we take that and we harden it and we solidify it. And we then use that as the frame in which we see life. And that's the danger. So it's not that story is bad necessarily, but it becomes unhelpful and unskillful when it directs our life versus having the capacity and the range to all right, sometimes it's great to share my feelings. Sometimes it's not great. I'm going to tune into the moment and feel into what's right in this situation and make my own choice. But instead we're driven by these stories that almost give us no choice. Either we always talk about our emotions and we never shut up, or we never talk about our emotions. And so it's that level of awareness that I think is really, really key. And we can feel it in our bodies often when there's a story at play, like there's a tension, there's a tightness, there's a kind of a closing of the heart. And can we become curious when those moments happen and bring a lot of love and tenderness and curiosity to that experience so we can begin to get some insight into how that plays in our lives?
So what were the stories running in your family?
There were several stories that happened. One was that so we were kind of non-Christians in this Christian, kind of Bible Belt Christian town where probably 98% of the people were probably Christian and we were not, or that's what it seemed like and felt like at the time. So we were very, very competitive. And so part of our theme or our story was we were winners. So when we went out and played soccer or basketball, whatever it was, we needed to win. And if you walked into our house on our family room, there was these shelves of trophies, probably like 100 trophies of all the trophies the family won. And that was a really big part of that story. It's whatever you do, you need to do the best. You need to win. Now, is there anything wrong with winning? No. But if it becomes identity and if it becomes who you think you are, then it drives you. And so I had to really look at how much of my life is still on that path to win. And, I think there was also a certain period of just keeping, like many people have, where it's better to not share emotions. It's better to keep them hidden. It's better to hold them in and kind of tough it out. I think that was very much a story in my family as well.
And I'm interested that you a couple of times have been talking about the wisdom being inside. You can actually feel when there's a story coming up because of how you're feeling inside. How did you learn to pay attention equally to what was happening inside you as all the messages from outside?
I don't think most of us are conditioned or encouraged to attune to the inner world.
No.
And I think it was suffering. My inner world was just really, really chaotic. I couldn't sleep at night as a kid. I had so much anxiety and fear. And, at first it's just like, what kind of drug can I take, or alcohol can I drink, or what can I do to ease that fear and that anxiety? I think that's why a lot of people go to pubs, or they go out drinking, or they go do something. There's a certain level of anxiety and tension, and they just want relief. And whatever that alcohol or drug does gives them momentary relief of feeling that pain and tension. And I fortunately kind of had other opportunities to explore that with meditation that made me realize it's not really the fear and the anxiety that's a problem. It's our resistance to the fear and the anxiety the problem. So we think we have to go away from it. And the answer is, I'm sure you know as well, is to be able to go gently into it with a certain level of openness and curiosity, so that we don't have to spend our lives using substances to run away from pain or hurt. And when you actually see it clearly, it changes our relationship to it, because it no longer has the power that it once did when we're trying to ignore it or we're trying to run from it.
The most beautiful question I was ever told, and I use it a lot myself, is, what is the feeling trying to tell you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there a teaching? I think that's beautiful. What is the teaching that's showing up here? And imagine having that level of openness to life. Something happens and it's like, wow, what is the learning here? What is the teaching here? A lot of people in the United States are going through that, where, we have a new president who's very volatile and crazy in some ways. And it's like, all right, so what is the teaching here? What is showing up in my consciousness? And what is the teaching for me to learn? And it's not like the Democratic Party is all amazing and authentic and value-based either, but whatever's emergent, are we resisting the moment? Are we fighting the moment? Or are we open and curious about the moment? I think those are great inquiries.
And so how can we be open to the moment that's happening without actually being too distracted? Because the moment is presenting us with thousands and thousands of distractions.
So in this moment, for example, let's say, and that's always it. It's only this moment, because like everything else is a dream. What you had for breakfast, what you will have for dinner, what we had, anything yesterday, anything tomorrow. Like, I think it's hard to argue against that. It's all a dream, right? Like it's just a thought.
Well, the past is the dream, and the one coming
future
up
is a fantasy of some sort.
The future is a fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's hard to argue against that, right? It's hard to argue. It's like, no, the future that I'm imagining of like, it may happen the way we have a calendar, have a schedule throughout the day. Like, it may happen, it may not happen, but it's in this moment. All I know is I'm here right now. Together with me. Yes, this is it. This is how life is unfolding in this moment. I'm this form, you're this form. There's these mics in front of us. There's visual, there's auditory sensations that are happening, stimuli. And so can I be with you right now in this moment? And can anybody listening or watching this kind of like be like, okay, this is my only moment I'm living. It's just this moment. And as we prioritize that moment and spend less time worrying about the past and the future, there is a certain level of contact and of direct experience that's palpable, that begins to be felt more and more. And so we live from this place of actual connection versus these mental stories that we're running as we're driving here and running there and trying to get this happen here. And it's like the stories that just consume us. So for me, it's just a gradual practice every day, as many times as possible, and coming back and realizing, all right, what moment am I living? I'm living this moment. Okay, let's just be in this moment. If I can take care of this moment, all the future moments will take care of themselves. But right now, can I just tend to this moment? And how often do you do that a day? As many times as possible. And sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's not. It's just like I'm walking to my car. I'm like, oh, my footsteps. I'm opening the car and I'm grabbing the handle. It's like, coolness of this handle. and lowering my head to get in. So it just connects in more and more. So sometimes it's verbal and sometimes it's just naturally occurring. And I would say that the days when I go to bed at night and I feel the most at ease and purposeful are days where that happened more and more. And the days where I don't do that, generally at the end of the day, there's more stress in my body and there's more tension in my mind.
So what did you learn with the juveniles in New York City?
So I used to work with juvenile hall kids in New York City and other cities, but mainly New York City. And I did it because meditation had been really important to me. Meditation yoga had been really important to me as a teen. And I wanted to be able to offer this to the younger generation. And when I tried to offer it in the community, there were very few people interested just because most kids didn't care. But when you're in a juvenile hall and you don't have your phone, you don't have social media, and you don't have much TV, often kids are very open to learning. And so I moved to New York City and started a program called the Lineage Project, which went into juvenile halls and worked with kids. And one of the things I realized was how I had to kind of change my languaging to help connect with them around these practices. So one of the things I would do when I first started doing it, I'm like, hey, I'm going to teach you this thing called meditation. I know it's weird and strange, but let's give it a try. And then I realized that's probably not the best approach. So I'd have conversations with the kids and I'd be like, when did you feel the most alive in your life? Like, let's talk about that. And some kids would say, oh, when I was playing sports, there was this one time I was dribbling the ball down the court and I just felt like I was totally in the zone. And like, I made the shot. And other kids said, one kid said, when I run from the cops, it's so exciting. I have to be completely in the moment because like they're chasing me and I don't know where to run or where to go. And it's just like thrilling, like to run from the cops. And so realizing that we've all had these moments of connection with life, right? We've all had these moments where just like, fuck, this is cool. Life is happening now. I'm in it. And so I would say, well, here's a practice that we can do together that hopefully creates conditions so that you can experience that same sense of aliveness, but you don't need to run from the cops and you don't need to play a basketball game. We can actually have that in this moment. Is anybody interested in that? And the kids raise their hand like, I'm interested in that. Like, cool, let's see if we can do this because it's all inside us, right? Like it exists inside us. So we don't need these external things. Let's see if we can explore that ourselves. And so that was my work for maybe 4 years, was just going inside various juvenile halls and being with the kids and them feeling my pain, me feeling their pain, and seeing if we could navigate how we could be together with it all. And they had court dates. I mean, their life was chaos. They had court dates coming up. Some went for attempted murder, some went for truancy. I mean, the whole range. And yet they were these beautiful, loving, amazing kids who were just trying their best to survive.
So I'm thinking with AI, and actually what you're talking about is something really quite deep, quite mystical, quite spiritual. And we're going to be competing against these AI systems. Already people are asking AI, should I stay with my wife or should I leave her, rather than coming and speaking to me about it. So I, to survive, have got to give something that AI can't give. What can I give that AI can't?
So before I answer that, I think there is this larger wave that's happening where there's now AI agents. So if you need a task done, you can ask the agent to do it, and the agent will, search through the internet and buy your tickets or plan your vacation or whatever you want it to do. And that's just going to get better and better. Robots are going to get more and more sophisticated, and there'll be millions of robots in all the factories doing a lot of the work that now humans do. I mean, that's already started, but that'll continue. Anywhere where knowledge is helpful, AI can read every book on a topic and have that knowledge available to it. So it's going to be very hard for people who work in any industry where knowledge is important to be able to compete with an AI where it just has all the knowledge possible. So vast areas of our world is going to need to be adapted. And where I live in San Francisco, we have driverless cars, the cabs that kind of take people around everywhere.
Sounds horrible.
I've never driven in one yet, but it's the future, right? And they actually have less accidents than humans, and that is the world that's moving. And whether that's how fast that moves, I don't know, but that's the direction we're moving in. And if you're a company and you're hiring, let's say 1,000 people to work in a factory and your competitor has 1,000 robots working in a factory, it's going to be very hard to compete because they don't need health insurance. They work 7 days a week, 24/7. The robots do. The robots don't need to be paid. You just have to buy the robots. So increasingly, the incentives are going to be towards
and the robots don't pay taxes either. So, how are we going to fund anything?
Yes. So everything will be very, very cheap, but the societies will have to figure out, do we create an AI tax or how do we create revenue in this new system? But the jobs, I think, will be fewer and fewer. I could be wrong, but this is my personal opinion. The jobs will be fewer and fewer, and the society will have to figure out, how do we tax the AI so that the culture still exists and that people can do things and get paid by the AI tax? So if you want to be an artist or something, there's resources that are taken from one pot and put into another pot, because I do think that's what we're going to need. Now, to answer your question, I think there is a quality of presence and a quality of wisdom that I think no AI can offer. And the presence comes because you're human to human, and there's a powerful connection there that I don't think is going to be gone. And there's also a lived experience that you have, you can then relate to another person with. The AI doesn't have lived experience. They have knowledge. They've read every book on psychology or whatever it is, but they don't have lived experience. And I think that's going to be the thing that really kind of matters in the end, because I think we're wired for human connection, and we're wired for wisdom, and we're wired for compassion, and that the AI will be great, on answering certain questions, but it won't be great on some of these other areas.
So it might be great on how do I fill in this form, but might not actually be quite so good on should I leave my wife or not?
Yeah, that's what it would be great to process large amounts of information. So if you get a whole series of tests through a doctor, and you want something to process that, or if there's a large article, you don't have time to read 20 pages of the article, and you're like, can you summarize this to me in a page? Excellent at that. But in terms of human emotions and human big answers, I could be wrong and it develops that at some point, but at least where we are today, I think increasingly humans need to feel loved and connected to, and we need other humans for that.
Could it make us more spiritual? Because we're going to sort of need to go into the mysteries of the world.
It depends on how we use it. So potentially it can, the AI leaders will tell us it's going to free up a lot of our time. And so we'll have more time to go on our own spiritual journeys. But I do think it can be a beautiful guide, a beautiful source of help. But in the end, to me, the spiritual path is independent of an external guidance, right? It's about our own our connection to our inner self and to our own natural intelligence, and to this incredible, as I mentioned before, the Big Bang, universal intelligence. And so to harness that, we don't need anything. We don't need an AI. We don't need to have a degree. We don't need to have a relationship. We don't need anything. That's always inherent and independent in each one of us, no matter our life situation. We think, if I only get this life situation. No. It's any life situation that's accessible. So to me, that's the spiritual life. And if we use AI well, I think it can help us in those directions. And if we use AI unskillfully, which means we always look to it, because there's some questions that we need to go deep inside ourselves to answer. And so I think it depends on our relationship to the AI.
Well, and our relationship to ourselves, because we need to actually trust that there is something deep inside us to actually inquire and ask. Yeah.
I think that's what a great therapist does, is that a great therapist knows the questions to ask that help that person go more deeply inside. Versus yes, you should leave your wife, or no, you shouldn't. It's there's so many deeper layers of questioning. Now, there are these AIs that people are developing that have a camera, and it tracks subtle movements in the face and tone of voice, and then it tries to give guidance based on all the inputs it's getting from the person. But I don't know how well they do it. It's uncertain yet how effective those are.
Well, we're going to be entirely human in trying to deal with the issue that we've got. We're not going to outsource it. We're going to have the wisdom of two people who've lived together well over 100 years on this planet. So I think we've got quite a lot of lived experience to share, and we'll do that in just a moment.
The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. Please follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material and other benefits.
Podbean, your message amplified.
Ready to share your message with the world? Start your podcast journey with Podbean.
Podbean, the AI-powered all-in-one podcast platform.
Thousands of businesses and enterprises trust Podbean to launch their podcasts.
Use Podbean to record your podcast.
Use Podbean AI to optimize your podcast.
Use Podbean AI to turn your blog into a podcast.
Use Podbean to distribute your podcast everywhere.
Launch your podcast on Podbean today.
Here's the letter for this week's edition. I'm in the middle of a separation from my wife after 17 years of marriage. We're still living in the same house, which makes things more complicated and sometimes more painful. Looking back, I can see how my focus on work, especially during a long and stressful business crisis, caused me to neglect her emotional needs. I wasn't present and I didn't listen. I was trying to be right, which left little space for her to feel seen, understood, or valued. She tried to reconnect several years ago, but I missed the signs, buried in stress and survival mode. In the last few years, I've done a lot of personal work, therapy, reading, self-reflection. I've changed. I feel calmer, more emotionally available, more capable of giving, not just needing. But she doesn't see it in the same way. She's emotionally shut down to me and appears to have feelings for someone else. She's been clear that she doesn't want to go back. Still, we share a house, and we still have warm moments. Part of me hopes these flickers might reignite something. I know I can't control her feelings. I don't want to manipulate or push her, but I do want to understand both how we got here and what I can do now. Whether that's learning to truly let go or become someone she might want to re-engage with, I don't know. I'm trying to show up better, to make her laugh again, to support her practically, to lighten the emotional load I once added to. At the same time, I wrestle with my own patterns, ADHD, anxiety, and the deep urge to fix things. Some days I feel strong and hopeful. Other days I feel lost, like I'm walking a lonely path while still loving someone who's moved on. What I'm looking for is insight. How do you keep showing up with love while honouring someone's decision to walk away? How do you let go of control while still holding on to hope? I'd be grateful to hear your thoughts. Soren, that's a great question. How do you keep showing up with love?
That's a beautiful question. Would you like my reflections or my response to that? I don't always like answers. I think questions and answers is always kind of a weird phrase, but I can definitely share the impact that has on me and kind of my thoughts around it. And first of all, I think is just beautifully written, and I can really feel the human there that's struggling with this question, and both the curiosity that's there and also, the pain of a loss of connection that sounds like, at least for a while, was very profound. And I think we can all probably relate to those moments of a strong connection with another human being, whether it's a friend, a family, or a partner. And then what happens when that connection gets lost or gets not as strong? And I think that was just very, very well said and well spoken. And it feels to me that I believe it's a he, is doing really well in the sense of acknowledging the pain that he's going through and acknowledging the distance. He sounds like there's some reflection going on about his own struggles and his work patterns that might have impacted how this moment has come to be. Like in any moment, we co-create the moments, I think. It's like, well, this person did this, and usually there's a deeper story there that has both participants kind of creating a condition. I don't know how much he's talking to his partner about this. It's unclear to me how many conversations they've had or what the nature of the conversations have been. So that feels like a little uncertain. I think, one of the biggest kind of teachings that I have appreciated is to have this balance where we're open to our experience without identifying with our experience. So we're noticing our pain, we're noticing our sadness, we're noticing our fear, and we're being with those experiences, but we're not letting them consume us. And when I say consume us, I mean, people then go into this kind of depression, like I'm a failure, or my wife doesn't love me anymore, or these stories kind of get developed versus actually tapping into the pain and the feeling of that emotion. Like, what does that actually feel like in our bodies? What are the stories that come up in our heads? And so we're almost like a scientist investigating that experience versus somebody that kind of like begins to close down and starts believing these stories like, oh, I had this great marriage and now I lost it and woe is me and everything's going to be horrible from here on out, and realizing like, oh, this is just another experience in the human connection. And where do we get the support that we need to bring greater clarity to the situation? And some of that support might be a therapist. Some of that support might be a friend. Some of that support might be a retreat. Some of that support might be all different things. But I think the question of like, where is it that we can get stronger and nurtured so that we can begin to address whatever life is presenting to us, to me is the question. And if we can get stronger and be more resourced, then whatever challenges we come, whether it's a person leaving or coming or a child leaving or coming, I trust that we can be able to hold that in a way that's thoughtful and wise. And I think that's really the question is, how do I hold this in a way that's thoughtful and wise? And nobody can really tell us how to do that. I don't know this person's situation, like, well, you should do this or you should do that. But I do know that as we begin to open to our emotions, explore our emotions, become curious about our pain, look for support in whatever form that takes, generally we're able to navigate life in a way that's helpful.
And I think what you were talking about earlier about living in the moment, of actually being there as we walk to the car and that we are conscious of bending down and checking in with ourselves, the only moment is now, is really important, because it's very easy to get pulled back into the past and fearful about the future. And I always say you're not allowed to think any further ahead than the weekend, so you're allowed to plan something for the weekend, so you're not just sitting at all on your own some all weekend, but really you've got to live in the moment. Can you cope with now? Yeah, I can cope with now, but when it becomes problematic is when I get past the weekend.
Yeah. Eckhart Tolle has this great question where he says, what problem do you have right now? It's a really interesting inquiry. What problem do you have? You might have a challenge right now. There might be a challenge like my foot hurts or there's a pain in my chest. But if we really ask that question and realize a lot of our problems are happening because of a thought about some other moment not happening in the present moment, which doesn't mean we don't need to plan and, schedule things. But it is an interesting inquiry to look at.
And the next thing I'm reflecting on your idea of the fact that he needs connection. And the problem is that for most men, we've been trained, if we need connection, where do we go? We go to a woman, and we outsource our emotional stuff to women. And within 30 seconds, you're having an affair with them or you're having a relationship with them, which is not a good way to start a relationship. But you do need connection. I mean, first of all, which I think is beginning to happen to yourself, other men, because you're not the only man in this world, I can tell you, whose wife doesn't love them anymore. There are very few men that actually sit with this and do what you're doing. So more power to you. But connecting to other men so you don't feel so alone in the world. To your family, to your children. My guess is, I don't know you have children, but I'm pretty certain after 17 years of marriage there probably are children. I'm sure they felt rather neglected in this period too. And it might be good to be spending more time with them. And perhaps you already are, but you could spend even more time with them. You could show up for other people's children, a bit like Soren did by going to juvenile, the equivalent for where you are of juvenile hall. So you can get connection in lots and lots of different ways beyond, sleeping with another woman. The third thing I would say is if your wife is attracted to someone else, what she's currently involved in is not an attachment to somebody else, but to an attachment to a story. And that story is that maybe this is going to be better for her. And it's really very difficult while she's actually in that moment where she's looking to see if this story is true or not, for you to try and convince her one way or the other, because we're talking about the future. Who knows what it's like? So don't try and compete. Try and be yourself, be able to be centered and hold on and not get sucked into that competition, because men love a competition. They'd quite like a trophy to go on the wall as well. But it's not about that. It's about you having a relationship with yourself, being centered. And the fact that you're sticking around, that you're continuing to show up as a good man, I think that the fascination with that story of there might be something better will actually just slowly dissipate. We don't need to spark or reignite something. What we need to do is get you connected with yourself. And once you're connected to yourself, you'll find connection to other people that much better. I hope that was helpful. So before we start summing up, I just wonder if you have any more advice for us on how to live in the age of distraction.
I think, one is to look at how we begin a day and how we end a day. Well, how do we spend that first hour of the day and how we spend that last hour of a day? Sometimes it's very hard to control what happens during the day because of work and because of other things. But having some practice that you do in the morning, whether it's meditation or yoga or going outside, I think is hugely valuable. And just paying attention to how you end a day. How do you end a day? Do you spend that last hour doing the same, or do you spend that last hour, running 1,000,000 miles an hour?
And one thing that really helps that I fight with every day is if the first thing you do is not pick up your telephone.
Yeah. That in and of itself is incredible practice and not an easy practice. But I think that is the modern day practice, is if you start your day and end your day in that mode, you're not going to sleep as well. You're not going to be as effective during the day because there's no time in which you're not consuming data. And when we consume data, it's very tiring. It stalls whatever momentum we might have for something else. So agreed with you. That's a really important piece. And to the extent we can be out in nature, nature feeds us, right? I've never met somebody who went for a walk. I'm like, I wish I hadn't gone for that walk. Like almost every time we go out in nature, I think we're fed by that.
So I have to ask you, as a witness on the meaningful life, what makes your life meaningful?
I think what makes my life meaningful is to feel like I'm in service to the world and to the needs of the world, and that my efforts here are hopefully creating conditions that make life easier for my current generation and future generations, and that I'm building community and friends as I do that is really, really meaningful to me, and that I'm doing my best to take care of my family to whatever extent I can. I've always loved the phrase that says, tend to the area of the garden you can reach. Like, I can't help the entire garden, but there's a part of the garden I can reach. And just trying to do that for my friends, my family, and my world, that's what gives me meaning.
Attend to the part of the garden you can reach. That's a lovely thought, and one I'm going to take away with me. The conversation doesn't end here. If you're a supporter of The Meaningful Life, we're going to be discussing working with what is. And if you want to hear the bonus material, you can subscribe directly via Apple or Spotify. We're also available on Amazon Music. And if you want to become a supporter of The Meaningful Life, here are the details.
You've been listening to The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall. You can follow Andrew on Twitter, like him on Facebook, and please leave a review wherever you consume your podcasts. Making, editing, and distributing The Meaningful Life comes with substantial costs, and we'd like to ask for your help. Visit our website, andrewgmarshall.com/podcast, where you can join our supporters club and unlock bonus material for every program, send in a letter to be discussed by Andrew and his guests, and join a community of other people seeking to make their life meaningful. At the gold level, you get even more benefits. Production of The Meaningful Life with Andrew G. Marshall is by Michael Dooney. Social media by Madeleine Healy. Sound engineering and theme tune by Sebastian de la Luz Mendoza. And I'm Susie Colick. Please tell your friends and spread the word. Thank you.
Suffs, the new musical, has made Tony Award-winning history on Broadway.
We demand to be heard.
Winner, Best Score.
We demand to be seen.
Winner, Best Book.
We demand equality.
It's a theatrical masterpiece that's thrilling, inspiring, dazzlingly entertaining, and unquestionably the most emotionally stirring musical this season. Suffs, playing the Orpheum Theater, October 22nd through November 9th. Tickets at BroadwaySF.com.